The Little Bookroom by Eleanor Farjeon. The Little Lady's Roses. Down in the valley was the village where John and Mary lived with their mother and father in a little cottage and went to school when the bell rang in the little schoolhouse on weekdays, and to church when the bells rang in the little church on Sundays. And up on the hill was the great mansion where the little lady lived all by herself with her servants, and paced up and down the long flight of stone steps between the cypresses and orange trees, or walked in her rose garden, which was the loveliest in the world. The hill was high and the valley was deep, so people seldom went up or came down. Only a silvery river flowed between the high mansion and the low cottages and seemed to bind them together. When they were out of school, Mary helped her mother in the kitchen, and before she was 10 could bake little pies fit for a queen. And John dug in the garden with his father, and before he was 12 could raise cabbages fit for a king. In their free time, the children played in the fields with their schoolfellows, or paddled in the shallow pools of the river as it flowed down the middle of the valley. One hot June day, as they were splashing in the shallows, they saw in the distance 2 tiny specks floating towards them. "Here come the boats," cried John. "With red and white sails," said Mary. "I'll have the red one," said John, and Mary said, "I'll have the white." But as the tiny craft came nearer, the children saw they were not boats, but roses. They had never seen such roses for color, size, and perfume. John captured the red rose and Mary the white one, and home they ran with their prizes. When their parents saw the roses, the father said, "By my shovel and hoe. If I could grow roses like that in my garden, I'd be a proud man." And the mother cried, "Dear bless my cherry tart. If I could have roses like them in the home, I'd be a glad woman." Then the father asked, "Where did you get 'em, children?" "They came down the river from the top of the hill," said John. "Ah," sighed the father, "then they came from the little lady's rose garden and are not for the likes of us." And he went out to hoe cabbages while the mother rolled her paste. But John and Mary stole out of the cottage, and John said to Mary, "Let us find the little lady's rose garden and beg her for a rose tree to make our parents proud and happy." "How shall we find it?" said Mary. "We'll take the road up the hill that the roses took down." "What road is that?" said Mary. "The river," said John. So they followed the river uphill till they came near the top and were stopped by a big iron gate that led to the longest flight of steps they'd ever seen. On the steps the little lady herself paced slowly up, and when she reached the fountain at the top she turned and paced slowly down again. At the bottom of the steps she saw the little faces of John and Mary pressed against the bars. "What are you doing?" said John. "Counting the steps," said the little lady. "Why?" said Mary. "Because I've nothing else to do," said the little lady. "Why don't you go and hoe cabbages?" said John. "My head gardener won't let me." "Why don't you go and bake pies?" said Mary. "My head cook would be cross with me." "Father lets me hoe cabbages," said John. "Mother lets me bake pies," said Mary. "How lucky you are," said the little lady. "Who are you?" "John," said John. "Mary," said Mary. "Where do you come from?" "The village in the valley." "What have you come for?" "A red rose tree for father," said John. "A white one for mother," said Mary. "Oh," cried the little lady, "did you find the roses I sent down the river? How glad I am!" "Why did you send them down?" asked John. "To bring someone back. You can't think how dull it is with nobody to play with. If you'll stay and play with me, you shall have a rose tree apiece, and my head gardener won't know the difference." So John and Mary stayed all day with the little lady, playing in her rose garden and her grand rooms till they were tired. And she sent them home with a rose tree apiece, which they took to their parents, saying that they had had the happiest day of their lives. But next morning the little lady found counting the steps duller than ever, so when she reached the gate she opened it for the very first time and ran down the hill. On reaching the village, she went straight to John and Mary's cottage, walked in, and said, "I want to bake pies and hoe cabbages." "Bless my apple dumpling, so you shall," said the mother. So first the little lady got her hands as white as flour, and then as black as earth, and when she went home she took a cabbage and a pasty with her, and said it was the happiest day of her life. After this, whenever she was lonely, she knew she had only to run down the hill herself, or set a rose sailing to bring up a child. A white rose brought a girl, but a red rose brought a boy. And sometimes she gathered a whole skirtful of roses and set them afloat, and on those days every child in the village was seen to be running up the hill to the little lady's rose garden.